this week on the show, we're going to be talking with Damien Miller of the OpenSSH team. We'll be discussing some of the changes in their latest 7.0 release, including phasing out older crypto and changing one of the defaults that might surprise you. BSD Now, episode 104, Beverly Hills, 255-19, recorded on August 26, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Glad to have you guys with us this week. We got another exciting show coming. There's going to be an awesome interview, so plenty of reasons to stick around, and of course, stay tuned to your favorite source for BSD news and information. So we're going to get right into the headlines this week. So first up, we got a cool article about some OpenBSD love on a Edge router Lite. So I guess I'd never heard of this little device before, but for those who don't know, it's kind of like a little Raspberry Pi and a bunch of those other kind of cheaper ARM boards.
But it's meant to
and
be
it's
a router.
getting more popular. Yeah, except it's made to be a router. So
you always see
it's got more than one port.
Yeah, people trying to use the Raspberry Pi as a router, and it's like, well, you're going to have like USB Ethernet? How about no? So something with real network cards designed to be a router would be much nicer.
That is very, very nice. So anyway, it looks like we got a cool article here. Who wrote this? Was this Ted?
This one's Ted Unangst on his blog.
Yep. And he wrote up some notes about installing and using OpenBSD on it. And he covers, of course, doing a network install. But what's kind of weird is the bootloader and how that works, and getting U-boot and all those things kosher so you can boot up OpenBSD here. Looks like, what's it need? Like a FAT partition to make that happen. And then...
and you use the
doing
boot
some stuff over serial.
Octane Linux command to actually trick it into booting OpenBSD and get it going.
That's right. Yeah, it says here the kernel's loaded from MS-DOS FAT partition, and this installer should set that up for you, or you can use fdisk to set it up. Of course, space is tight, so he made just a single large root partition on that box. But yeah, this is pretty detailed and cool. He does mention one thing about the support is limited at the moment to only 256 megs of RAM and a single CPU.
And there's no onboard clock, so you'll have to use NTPD to keep the time.
Yeah, that's right. Which, that's a little weird, but hey, it works. Gets the job done.
Yeah, he says it's drawing about 8 watts of power, and so that's very good. He says because it's an Octeon processor, it's not very high power, but, works for his network, and as long as you're not trying to use it for like an IPsec gateway or something that's going to have to do encryption, then, it should be good.
That's right. I don't think he says necessarily what the his stats were here, like how far he could push it.
Right. But I'm sure it will push what most people's internet speed without a problem.
Yeah. For a home system, no problem at all.
I'm sure 100 megabits in each direction will not even break a sweat. So.
That's right. So we have a whole bunch of links here in the show notes as well, talking about this, and specifically we have stuff on Hackers News, we have some Reddit threads, and some mailing list posts here. Because also this is a MIPS 64 processor. They'll also have a little weaker ASLR than x86 CPOs, and there's no WX or X as well. So just a heads up on that if you really want those features on your router. Okay, what do we got next here?
We have the book review. Yes, vaguely. Oh no, it's English too. Okay. InfoQ.com did a review of the design and implementation of FreeBSD book that Kirk McCusick, George Neville Neal, and Robert Watson wrote. I finally got all 3 autographs on my copy. I had to fly to the UK to do it.
Right? You have to go to the Watson.
Yes, the Watson does not come to you. But they're talking about how it weighs in at over 900 pages and covers everything from virtualization to sandboxing, NFS v4, ZFS, how the kernel works, and everything. And they go on to talk about how you don't have to be a kernel developer to understand it. A lot of it is written there so that even as a sysadmin, just understanding the basic concepts of how some of that stuff internally is working gives you a better idea of, why it's working this way, or why the performance isn't right, or what knobs there are that you can tune. And when you change this sysctl from this value to this value, what's actually different? What's happening?
That's right. Well, and included is a really nice interview they did with Marshall Kirk McCusick as well. which is pretty fascinating. So he talks and goes into a little more detail about some of the background about the book and some of the things you'll find within it. So yeah, it's neat to see that
Yeah,
happened.
and there's talk about the history of the operating system and where the newer features came from and so on. But also, Kirk talks about how the different ways that the book is useful to all kinds of different people, and talking a bit about the fact that FreeBSD is widely used in lots of places, whether it's Netflix and WhatsApp, or Yahoo and Juniper, or
Hmm.
NetApp and EMC and Isilon, or OS 10, etc.
Sure. Okay, well, next up, we have talked in, I think last week or the week
Yeah,
before, we talked about the the tame
API.
function that went into OpenBSD. And so it looks like they've beefed that up a little bit now with the path list parameter.
Hmm.
So, of course, when we mention tame, it's basically easy to implement self-containment framework. So you can have programs give themselves a reduced feature set,
Yeah,
run
so
with less
when the
privileges.
program starts up, it has all those privileges, it does some stuff, but once it enters the main service loop where it's just going to be, providing a service or whatever and doesn't need the fancy privileges anymore, you can use the tame API to lock it down.
Hmm.
However, they're having some difficulty kind of balancing what you're allowed to do and what you're not. And so they basically allow you now to have a whitelist. So say, don't allow these things except for this list of very specific things that I need. Allow me to do
Hmm.
those. And it seems
That's
like
right.
a way to kind of solve the problem of, you know, I don't want to give
Basically say,
myself access to the entire file system. I
hmm
just need these
but I
specific
need a
files.
temp
Yeah,
directory somewhere
exactly.
or something,
Hmm.
that's pretty cool.
Yep.
So it looks like the next step now that that's landed is to add some tame restraints to the OpenBSD userland utilities. So you'll probably start seeing more things take advantage of this, and probably in by about 5.9 would be the
Yep.
guess. So of course we have links to a Reddit and some more Hacker News discussion on that as well. So if you'd like to follow along with
Yeah.
that, you
And
are
see, there's
welcome
some
to.
interesting discussion about, the change of the API and so on.
That's right. That's right.
And then we have big
Okay, well, this
news.
is one we've been waiting for a while, but this is kind of old news now. But FreeBSD and the PCBSD 10.2 release has landed. So if you've been waiting for that or didn't hear or didn't see the release announcement, yes, it is indeed out. So go ahead and do your updates now. But this is the second minor version bump of the 10.x branch. Some of the big notable features: Linux compatibility layer has been updated to support CentOS
Mhm.
6 rather than the older Fedora core base, which had been used
Yep.
previously.
Sadly, the
And all the
64-bit Linux support didn't get merged back in time. But
oh, oh,
yep.
bummer. We got to wait till 11 for
Yep.
that, right?
Maybe 10.3,
Okay.
but probably 11.
Yeah, that would be my guess. But
The other cool
yeah,
one
so that's good
was
stuff.
the RC script growfs is set up by default now. So if the file in the root directory called firstboot exists, the growfs command will run and expand your hard drive to the full
To the
size.
disk.
So if you,
Nice.
using an SD card or something and you DD the image front that you download from freebsd.org onto it,
Hmm.
normally it's like a 2 GB image. So if you got a 16
Sure.
megabyte SD or 16 gig SD card, it's only using a tiny bit of it. If you create this file, the first time it boots up, it will just grow and take it all. You can also do the same thing for virtual machines, right? You can create a
Hmm.
small virtual
Yeah.
machine image and you can reuse it many times, and then your different virtual machine be like, oh, for this virtual machine, I give it this big of a hard drive, and it'll just grow it.
Hmm. That's right. That's right. So let's see here. It looks like new installations and newly upgraded systems are now going to start using a quarterly package,
Yes,
binary
that was
package
another
set
big
rather than
change.
the rolling release.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
instead of getting the ports tree that updates once a week, that updates constantly and with packages once a week, you'll be on the quarterly branch. That means the major version of software you use won't change out from under you in the middle of whenever. So it'll get
Mhm.
security updates, but only that. And this, I think, will make some people's experience a lot nicer. You install stuff, you do package upgrade, and you're only going to get
Yeah.
security fixes and not lots of churn
A
for
little more
other
consistent.
stuff. And
That's
you
right.
can always switch back to the other one if you want. It's easy to do. You just create the file in user local etc package repos. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think a lot of people will gain quite a bit of value from that. Although if you're upgrading from 10.1, you might notice a difference as you switch. But I think we
Sure.
have a
Well, that would
feedback
make
question
sense.
about that later. I think this week or next. So.
Well, then we'll answer that in a little
But
bit.
they also
So,
talked about VXLAN driver. So that's the
mhm.
originally from OpenBSD, but it's a way to have to do a VLAN across the internet. or at least across the network. So the general idea here is if you're going to have a bunch of virtual machines, you want to be in the same VLAN, but one virtual machine's in that rack and one virtual machine's in this other rack that maybe aren't even in the same data center. Well, you can tunnel a VLAN over UDP so that it's basically Ethernet over UDP, so you can have a VLAN with multiple machines in it that don't necessarily have to be in the same place. And it expands. Normally, VLANs, you could only have up to 4,000. VXLANs allows, I think, either 65,000 or like 16 million or something. Much bigger number of VLANs.
Quite a lot, for sure.
So that you can do, one VLAN per customer or something like that.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So also, it looks like a Beehive code base, of course, is much newer. They've now enabled support for AMD CPUs with SVM and AMD V extensions.
Yes, I know a lot of people were waiting for to be able to run Beehive on their AMDs. So quite a bit of new Beehive code plus support for AMD on your 10.2, which would be nice.
Mm-hmm. Also, ARM and ARM64 codes saw a bunch of fixes and improvements, including SMP support on a few specific boards, and of course some new boards supported. And it looks like Bootloader now supports entering your Jelly passphrase before loading the kernel in a full disk encryption setup.
This
it'll pass it along to the kernel.
You'll be prompted for your password by the BSD menu if you have a certain variable set in loader.conf. And then the password prompt won't get buried in the middle of your regular dmessage output, and it will lead to successfully booting much more often.
Yeah, all those USB messages showing up, right, and clobbering the prompt.
So this is mostly thanks to you. You invented the whole concept for it, and then Devin just added the support in the BC menu to make it apply outside of just grub.
Well, it's nice that works, because that sure was heck of annoying, because you'd boot it up, and especially if you didn't remember that if you came to a system you don't reboot very often, and you're just like, why is it hung?
Like, worse was actually there was a bug in 10.0 where if you entered the first password wrong, you get 3 prompts, right? Your 3 tries.
Yeah.
If you got the first one wrong, even if you got the second one right, it would still say it was wrong, because it would erase the keys from memory after the first try, not realizing it still needed them for the second or third try.
Oh man!
And so if you didn't see it, you pressed enter for the first one to get a clear screen. It would then prompt you for your password. You type in the right password and it would say, sorry, that's wrong. You'd be like, maybe I typoed. Try it again. Nope, that's wrong. Fail. Don't boot.
Yeah, you're done. Yeah, that's a good one to have fixed. It also looks like, of course, there's been some assorted userland fixes, driver improvements, and various third-party tools in the base system have been updated, such as ResolveConf, NTPD, Netcat, File, Unbound, of course, OpenSSL, and SendMail. And we'll have a link to the full release notes for the rest of all the details and changes there. So, of course, this was free BSD, and all that's going to apply to PCBSD 10.2 release. So if you're on that, it's exactly the same thing. So you get all those goodies, but then we have a lot of our own specific bits where we have, for example, now CD size installation media. So you can do network install over the internet if you'd like, including a Wi-Fi configuration GUI in the installer. Nice. So if you need to connect to the Wi-Fi to do it, you can. We've started switching to IO cage for our jail management backend. So Warden is still included in 10.2, but will go away probably for 11.0. So we're encouraging people to start switching over. Let's see here, just a bunch of bug fixes to various utilities, improved localization options. New plugin system went into App Cafe, so we're going to start loading it up with different plugins where it's like a pre-built jail environment you can download with IO Cage and just have something run like a Plex Media Server, for example. Also, a lot of its support and improvements for 4K monitors. So if you're on a high-res monitor, it should look a heck of a lot nicer, and you should enjoy that. I know it looks a lot nicer on my desktop here. So yeah, definitely you need to upgrade to that and start getting that today. Nice. Okay, so before we go into our interview, of course, today, we got to mention our first sponsor this week, which is going to be IX Systems. And the URL for that is obvious, ixsystems.com, where you can go to /BSD Now and let them know that we sent you, and get in touch with these guys to get set up with your next server purchase or system purchase or storage or whatever it is you need. Or if you got some crazy project, you can call and talk to them, see if they can make that happen for you.
Yes, and actually my hardware from them arrived yesterday.
Pictures?
Yes, I have pictures.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So you can see it sports the new IX logo on the front of the system. Looks very nice.
Fancy.
You can see it's a 4U system with 24 5-terabyte hard drives. There's actually 2 of them, but I only took pictures of one. You can see they did a very nice job inside with it. looks very good. You can see
Yeah.
it's a dual Xeon E5 2630 V3s, so they're Haswell, and they have 128 gigs of DDR4. And you can see
Nice.
there's 3 LSI 9207-8Is that connect the 24 SATA drives directly with no expanders or anything.
Mm-hmm. This get shipped to your
Yes,
house,
this
Alan, or
this
is this
one's
at a
at
data
my
center?
house. This picture is on my basement floor.
There you go.
And you can
Okay.
see here's the me taking all the empty drive caddies out to fill them with hard drives.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's right.
lots of screws with 48 5 terabyte hard drives, and you got to put 6 screws in each caddy.
Yeah.
Takes a little while.
Very nice. So you can basically stop drooling now
Yes.
because this thing Alan is showing you pictures of. You could get one of those too,
Yes.
or something similar, or maybe you want something completely
Yeah.
different. But talk to the guys over at IX Systems, and of course they will make that happen
Yeah.
for you.
Whether you need 2 cores or 80, or if you need
Right?
1 gig NIC or a 10 gig NIC or 24 10 gig NICs or a bunch of 40 gig NICs, whatever you want left.
Yep, they'll make that happen. And so, yeah, definitely get in touch with those guys. And of course, when you do talk to the IX guys, mention that you heard it here on BSD Now. We would appreciate it if you do that. Well, we're joined now by Damien Miller, an OpenSSH developer. So first of all, thank you so much for coming back on the show again, Damien. We appreciate it.
A pleasure. It's been a couple of years. Good to be back.
Yeah, we're glad to have you back. So we'll just get right into it, though, since we've already asked you the other stuff before. But tell us what the story is with OpenSSH 7.0 and then, of course, the upcoming 7.2. Why are there going to be such significant releases happening?
Well, there's been, I think the last time I came on was about 3 years ago. And there's been a lot of work happening since that time. And I suppose the thing which has been motivating the most recent releases is some pruning of the cryptography that we're recommending users use. That's a bit tautological, but
Sorry.
so OpenSSH, the SSH protocols were developed like early in the 2000s, and they reflected a sort of kitchen sink mentality. It was fairly prevalent at the time, where you gave people lots and lots of choices in case some turned out bad. There'd always be something that they could switch to, and there wasn't the sort of range of cryptography. Well, there were more trade-offs inherent in the cryptography at the time. Like there were ciphers that were new, and AES was still pretty new. There were ciphers which were trusted, but had some caveats like triple des. And so the SSH protocols, as they were originally specified, baked all of these things in. And of course, there was the fast cipher, which was RC4. Now, over time, everyone's kind of gravitated to a much narrower set of ciphers, and problems have become apparent in the way that the SSH protocols are constructed with regards to MAC ordering and stuff like that. So we want to sort of unweave kind of this tangle of options and just present things which are known to be secure, and if there's a trade-off to be made between speed or standards compliant, then those are the options that we should present, not just this sort of kitchen sink for historical reasons. So what we've been doing is removing from the default list of things that the server and client will accept a bunch of ciphers and key exchange algorithms and things like that. Some of them because they don't have practical use, but mostly because most of them are motivated by actual weakness. And doing this, we've been going fairly slowly because there's the possibility that we'll break people's connection. Like they'll SSH to a server and they'll not be able to negotiate a connection without changing their defaults.
That'll make some people cranky, I imagine.
Yeah, that's right. And that's, it's difficult for us to assess the right pace at which to do this because, we make a source release, and there's only there's only a couple of operating systems that pick that up very promptly. OpenBSD is the most obvious one because that picks it up in the next timed release, and a few other operating systems will do timed releases and run at the bleeding edge, like your Gen 2s and stuff like that pick it up almost immediately. But for most people, they get their software through their hands in a binary release from their operating system distributor, and if they're running a stable version of an operating system, it might be many months or possibly even years before they actually get it. So we've been going fairly slowly on this and going a little bit more quickly lately, just because we want to see this done, and people moved to a good set of options. And I mean, for the most part, we're not actually removing anything. I mean, the big exception to that is turning off SSH1 at compile time by default, but mostly it's just changing the defaults.
Right, you kind of want to avoid the situation we were in with TLS, where it's like, well, everybody still supported SSL v2 and v3, and then we learned that's really kind of a bad idea, and we get these downgrade attacks. And
yeah, and that's exactly the sort of situation we want to avoid. Now, downgrade attacks on the SSH protocols haven't been so practical. The key exchange for SSH is actually pretty good, I think. And I say this as a non-cryptographer, more of a sort of crypto engineer. It's proven to be robust against most of the things that have broken TLS with regards to downgrade, but there's still some problems on the horizon, right? A lot of the strength of the key exchange rests in the client trusting the server host key, and that the server being able to make an unforgeable signature with that host key. And one of the signature algorithms or server key algorithms that SSH has supported since the beginning is DSA, and this was like the only mandatory one when the SSH2 protocols were standardized, because when they were standardized, RSA was still under patent, which is lapsed fairly quickly after during the standardization process. But they needed to specify something. And when they specified DSA for the SSH protocols, they only specified it with a SHA-1 signature and a 1024-bit key size. Now that, as time's progressed, that 1024-bit key size is now considered wildly inadequate for good for a good signature algorithm, and it corresponds to something like something between 80 and 112 bits of security if you're talking about symmetric ciphers. So that sort of thing is kind of within the realms of feasibility now for an active attack, of being able to, with given sort of security agency level resources, that's possibly conceivable. So that's probably one of the more problematic things that we've turned off, and it's also going to be probably one that gives us the most user pushback, because there's lots of devices out there that implemented the bare minimum of what the SSH spec required, and the bare minimum was DSA back in the early 2000s. So there's a bunch of small devices like routers and things like that which will only use this algorithm for key exchange signatures, which will need explicit configuration for people to talk to when they upgrade to the new version.
Cool. So companies that are making products and so on usually are not very quick to update their software, but need to be using this modern crypto practices and so on. So how do you think we can strike the balance between stability and having modern standards?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's several dimensions to this, and one is software. I think like crypto is only one dimension of the security of something like an SSH implementation. I think it's it's sort of a hygiene thing, right? You've got to be clean enough to be secure, but it doesn't save you from getting attacked, even if you implement all the crypto right. Because I think the thing that really decides whether an SSH implementation is good or not is the quality of the implementation itself, and how resistant it is to bugs, and how well it's been written, how well it's been tested, what mitigations it's got in place to against attacks. And I think things that aren't sort of actively maintained are a reasonable proxy for maintainers not paying attention to the other stuff as well. So I think companies that are shipping these ancient, and I don't think there's really any other word to describe them, implementations, probably just they need to pay a bit more attention to what is like SSH is one of the things that people allow even when everything else is firewalled. So I think it deserves the highest level of scrutiny. I think there's no shortcut for vendors other than keeping their code up to date, and it doesn't mean they have to use OpenSSH. There's other implementations like Dropbear which implement the more recent stuff as well and will work fine. But in a lot of cases, vendors have imported an ancient version of Dropbear and they've used that even for modern releases. They've never updated it. So they've ticked the box on their product marketing which says they can use SSH, and then they've moved on.
Right. So you're not thinking of any kind of like nag screens on an interactive session, like, hey, this is running really old stuff. Consider updating or contacting your vendor for an update or something.
No. So what we do is what'll happen is when someone connects to one of these things, SSH will refuse to negotiate a connection, and the user will have to add a one-line, a command line argument or an entry into their config file. And there's a bit of a doc on the website about how to do that in a way that doesn't force you to use only that bad crypto, but will give you the opportunity to use something better in the future should your endpoint upgrade to it.
Okay.
We thought about nag screens, but I think we want to apply. I mean, this is the sort of the line that we're walking. We want to apply a little bit of friction so people are aware of it. And nag screens are just what people are like when presented with nag screens. They rapidly become delighted to them.
There's a reason why the host key nag screen makes you actually type the word yes instead of just press enter, right?
That's right. Yeah, and for something like a crypto option, that's kind of that's kind of suboptimal. Like you want it to be sort of auditable, so you need something in the configuration file. You'd like something in a configuration file that you can detect if you're like searching through a host and figuring out what's going on there. But you want it to be non-interactive as well, because most SSH connections are probably done by machines rather than humans these days.
Sure. So can you explain a little bit why we're switching away from AES to ChaCha20 as the default cipher, and do we have roughly the same level of confidence?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to have as much confidence in anything other than AES. I mean, AES is probably the most studied symmetric cipher ever, with the possible exception of triple DES or DES. So it's AES is very well regarded. But the ChaCha20 Poly 1305 authenticated encryption mode that we're using by default is considerably faster on many platforms, and has a small advantage in that it also hides the packet lengths. That advantage is mostly theoretical until we actually implement better measures to mitigate timing attacks in OpenSSH itself. But it is the fastest cipher, and it is an authenticated encryption mode, so it avoids a lot of the pitfalls of building one of these things out of a cipher and a message authentication code itself.
Sure.
And I think we think it's a good choice. Lots of people use it. Lots of people have been recommending using it. ChaCha20 is a well-regarded algorithm and has been approved for IET internet use by the what's the
Internet Engineering Task Force.
Yeah, or the CFRG, the crypto something.
Right. Okay.
I forget the acronym.
Too many acronyms.
Yeah,
That's across the crypto community.
Yeah, so it's and ChaCha20 came out of is a evolution of Salsa 20, which was reviewed pretty heavily as part of the European eStream project. So it's had a lot of scrutiny in itself, and I don't think there's any doubts over it as a good stream cipher.
Okay.
So I mean, I think the choice for I think the choice for SSH at the moment is AES GCM if your hardware supports it, AES counter with a Mac if your hardware doesn't do that, and you need to use AES for standards compliance reasons or whatever, or CHA-20 Poly 1305. And I think the latter is like fast, very fast, secure enough for just about every use, and it basically means that people don't need to mess with the configurations. Like a lot of what we've seen in the past is people switching to RC4 because it's a bit faster, and sure. we just want people to use something that is very secure and meets their performance needs without having to fiddle with their configuration files.
Right.
Makes sense.
So one of the upcoming changes is to disable the MD5-based HMAC, which was the default up until this. Is there realistic risk of a collision now, or is it just future-proofing?
It's sort of future-proofing. I think the MD5 as used in HMAC is still regarded as strong. The HMAC construction, HMAC's a much more forgiving environment than just used as a hash function, because there is a secret key involved. But people do it moves us a step closer to being able to deal with crypto libraries that are going to remove MD5 in the future. I think that writing's on the wall now, is that people are going to migrate away from that, and the best way to ensure that you don't use it is just to remove it from lib crypto. So that's part of the motivation. Another part is users saying, "Hey, why are you still supporting MD5? Isn't it weak?" And us getting a bit tired of saying, "Yeah, okay, well it's weak for as a hash function, but in HBAC it's not so bad." So it removes the need for us to reiterate that as well. But I mean, I think mostly MD5 it needs to go away, and I think anything we can do to facilitate removing it from crypto libraries is pushing in the right direction.
Okay. So what's the actual problem with CBC, the cipher blockchaining based ciphers, and why are they all being disabled?
Right. So the problem here is a combination of CBC and the way that the Mac message authentication code was applied in the SSH protocol. And I think we talked a bit about this and the last time we spoke. And of the three big crypto protocols that came out of the 90s, IPsec, TLS, and SSH, and each of them did a combination of symmetric cryptography and message authentication in a different way, and only IPsec got it right. So basically, and the problem is basically this: if you're not checking a message is intact and not modified before you're undoing any cryptography, then you run the risk of exposing something which should have been hidden. And basically, the attack in SSH is because you need to get the packet length for the CBC ciphers before you can read the whole packet and then figure out where the message authentication code is at the end to test it. Just decrypting that block which contains the packet length and acting on that information is revealing something about the contents of the packet, which an attacker can use to iteratively figure out stuff about the contents of the previous message or the. We're turning those off, and we're using a better Mac construction, which the encrypt then Mac Mac algorithms, which are the default for a couple of years now, and that does the things in the right order. It checks the Mac before it undoes any of the crypto. So if a message has been modified by an attacker who's trying to do this attack, then the connection will just be killed. The downside of that is that to figure out where the Mac is this message authentication code. You have to have the packet lengths in plain text, because otherwise it's this chicken and egg problem.
Sure.
Of, how do you get to the message thing without decrypting it? So that's kind of, I think, a mostly theoretical step back in terms of the privacy of the SSH protocol. But and I say mostly theoretical because you get that sort of information just by watching the timing and size of packets on the wire. For a long time, I've wanted to do something a little bit more active to frustrate those sort of attacks, but we haven't got to it yet. We're sort of a few rounds of refactoring away from making the internals of SSH clean enough to do that without piling hacks on top of hacks.
Sure.
So that's the only cipher that actually mitigates that exposure of the length packets is the CHA-20 poly 1305 one, which has got two instances of CHA which are completely independent. One of which is to encrypt the packet payload, and the other one is just to encrypt the packet lengths. So someone who figures out something about the packet lengths doesn't actually get anything useful out of that.
Cool. So currently the default host key type is ECDSA. Do you expect that to stay like that, or do you think it will be replaced by ED25519 or something similar in short order?
Yeah, I'd like it to. I think ED25519 is a really, really nice algorithm. Its biggest attraction to me is that it's quite resistant to failures in the operating systems around a number generator, like DSA and ECDSA. If you've got a bad random number generator, then you've got a complete compromise of the private key, which is famous. Sony made famous.
Mm-hmm.
Best example of that. But we've held off from that because we're waiting for a couple more implementations to implement the ED25519 host key type and an RFC to be written. I think one of the other open source implementers is actually writing up an RFC now, and I think at least libSSH and possibly Dropbear are implementing it as a key type. So I think when we've got interoperability, then we'll switch to it. Then I'd like to switch to it. I think it's a better algorithm than the way things are going. We are a little bit ahead of the rest of the IETF here because they're still sort of arguing on the CFRG mailing list about which signature algorithm to use, and it looks like what's going to come out of that might not be compatible with what we've implemented. But I think the benefits of getting to something which has the advantage of being resistant to like random number generator failures is more important than waiting for the outcome of that process.
Okay. So looking ahead a little bit here, what are some of the future plans for 7.2 and beyond? And are there any more deprecations we should be aware of, or other big changes pending?
So there's a couple more. There's a few more deprecations. Like, I mean, when I say deprecations, we'll be turning stuff off by default. So I think there's a couple more obscure ciphers like Blowfish and Cast, which I'd be surprised if are widely used by anyone, and they'll get turned off by default, and people can turn those back on. I think once we've done this, our focus is going to turn back towards refactoring a bit more, which has been what we've mostly been focusing on for the last couple of years. And I think I don't know who made up this saying, but there's two types of software. There's failures and legacy nightmares, and OpenSSH is a legacy nightmare. So we're trying to make it less of a legacy nightmare by making the internals a little bit more library-like, and then going back and writing unit tests for them and fuzz tests and stuff like that. And over the last couple of years, I think since I spoke to you last, we've factored out the packet parsing, the key parsing, the wire formatting, and a couple of other things into stuff that would be reasonable as a library, even though we're not choosing to expose it as one just yet. And we've got unit tests for those. We've got fuzz tests for those using AFL, which is Mikhail Zalewski's fantastic fuzzer. And that gives us a lot more confidence in the correct operation of those parts of OpenSSH, their security, and it makes the internals of the application a lot easier to reason about. There's still a fair bit more to do. I think the next big step will be the channels code, which is what handles file descriptors at the client and server side of login sessions, port forwarding, everything like that is the next big step, which is also the one that we need to surmount to implement sort of timing attack mitigation, which we've wanted to do for ages. So I think that's probably what we'll be focusing on, and really more testing, trying to drive out the last security bugs.
So has there been any consideration of implementing other cascading ciphers, or that is encrypt a packet with more than one cipher in case there's a weakness found in one of them later on? So kind of a rotation?
Yeah, I mean, a few people have asked me this, and the cryptographers that I've spoken to aren't, they don't say it's like a bad idea, but they don't see much benefit in it.
Okay.
The nature of these things is that we tend to get pretty early warning of ciphers becoming bad, and the time that we've got to move away from things is pretty ample. Okay. So I think anything we do would it would be in another situation where we're implementing an OpenSSH only thing, and without the carrot of the thing that we're implementing being like super usable for other people. So that's probably why we haven't done it. I mean, if someone who, like, if a cryptographer was to make a good case for it, then we'd probably do it quickly. But I don't know. Maybe if like someone started coming up with quantum computers that could be frustrated by this, and I don't think that's plausible either. That's just, I don't know. I think if I'm going to be led by the real cryptographers on this, and they're not generally, they've not sort of indicated that this is
anything useful,
a really worthwhile direction. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, it's killer for performance because you've got to
Sure.
do serial encryption twice, basically. So it's going to be at least twice as slow as something that's fast.
Which is quite a trade-off if you're not really getting a whole lot of gain out of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, if the gain's only purely theoretical, and then even then kind of doubtful, it's not very useful.
Theoretical gains for real-world performance hit. So there you go.
That's right. It might, the trade-off might be different for data at rest, right, which is widely disseminated. So I mean, if you say had a copy of the Snowden archive in its original unredacted form, and I'd probably encrypt that with every cipher, independent key that there was to ensure ensure the security of that. But because that's widely disseminated, it's going to be the focus of intense cracking by absolutely everyone. Whereas ephemeral network connections, even though we do know that intelligence agencies record them, the cost of attacking, because each of them is going to have an independent key, the cost of attacking a broad section of them is very, very high. The trade-offs are a bit different there.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about the recent security advisory where you could overwrite the username of a session?
Right. So this affects the PAM code in portable OpenSSH, which I think most operating systems enable by default, because most operating systems use PAM, and it's only applicable if an attacker has already compromised SSHD. So SSHD is privilege separated, which splits the process in two. There's a small part that retains privilege to do stuff like interrogate the password file and authenticate the user and set UID to to them when they are. And then there's the main part of the program which runs as an unprivileged user, optionally in a sandbox, which is probably the case for most operating systems now, and handles all the network traffic, wire packet parsing, and stuff like that. Excuse me. And there's a bug in the PAM code where if someone had already got remote code execution in that unprivileged process, they could use that to send messages to this privileged monitor process to switch the username from one user to another. So it's a weakness in our attack mitigation rather than an actual direct vulnerability in OpenSSH itself. It's only useful if for an attacker who's already got a good part of the way towards compromising SSHD. So it's suboptimal, but it's not as bad as it could have been.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure whether that how intentional that functionality was. So we imported the PAM code from FreeBSD, and one of the things that PAM you can do with PAM is you give it when you're logging in, you give it a username, and it can give you back a different username to say, well, I've gone off and looked up this username. You should actually be this person or this user, I should say, and complete your authentication as this. And OpenSSH has never supported that, just because it makes certain invariants a lot more complicated to maintain in the code itself. Though people have asked for it from time to time. So I'm not sure whether it was an intentional thing to allow for that particular use case in the PAM code, but it's not something we want to support, and it could be abused. So the steps, the conditions for an attacker to be able to abuse it were they'd need to be able to log in, and they'd need a vulnerability in the SSHD that they could get part way into it.
Yeah.
So
Pretty
it's
complex.
not too bad. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up here? We covered it all?
Yeah, so one thing that we've done recently, a couple of releases ago, which might be interesting as well, is the ability to have the server inform the client of all its host key types, which is good. We did a little bit earlier. We discussed how we're trying to move away from DSA keys, and one of the problems there is if a user has learned, like a particular host key for a server, there's no way for the server to say, "Oh, hang on a second, I've actually got this better algorithm that you could be using. You could be using an ED 25519 key or an RSA key instead of this crappy old DSA key." So a couple of releases ago, we added this as an optional message that the server can say, hey client, here's all my host keys. You might want to update yourself with them. And the client will say, oh yeah, okay, well, I've got this one already, but for these two, can you give me proof that you've got the private key? And so there's this little interaction where the server sends, here are the keys I've got. The client says, yep, show me signatures for these two to prove that you've got the private key. And then the client can update its known hosts file with the new keys. So it's not on by default, but it probably will be at some future time. That allows clients to move to better crypto as the server supports it. But so far only OpenSSH, I think, supports it. I haven't checked whether any of the other implementations do it yet. Hopefully someone will.
But yeah, I can definitely see that being useful when you're trying to upgrade, is to have a transition period where all the clients are learning about the new key, and when you switch to it, there's no surprise.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd hope that we could use this to get people off DSA, but then it sort of occurred to me that, well, the people who are still offering only DSA keys are not going to be, implementing an OpenSSH only extension to get people off them. So, but it'll be useful for OpenSSH users and anyone else who implements it to migrate to better key types.
Right. Do you have much interaction with some of the other implementations on trying to promote something like that to a standard feature rather than an OpenSSH specific feature?
Yeah, we're actually having a lot more conversations with them now, and I think some of the other implementers, particularly libSSH, they uh, they they they've been implementing better crypto as well, and driving some of that indeed. Like they were the first to implement the curve 25519 elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman key exchange method, and they helped us implement it ourselves. So the other implementers are certainly on board with at least some of what we're trying to do, which is really good because I think most of the SSH on the internet is open source, be it OpenSSH, libSSH, Dropbear, or Putty. I think is the vast majority of clients and servers out there. So if we can all be on the same page with regards to an agenda of modernising the protocol, then I think that's a fantastic thing for everybody.
Yeah. Do you think there's any thoughts on trying to move away from quite as much of a monoculture on OpenSSH as the server, and having some other alternative?
Well, a lot of a surprising proportion of the servers are actually Dropbear,
right? Especially in embedded things.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I think on workstations and servers, I think it's mostly OpenSSH, but on small devices, it's Dropbear, and I think I'm kind of biased because I work on OpenSSH, but I think if you're going to have a monoculture, then at least you've got a monoculture of people who care very deeply about avoiding bugs and implementing mitigations
and are actually
bugs, so.
maintaining the software and cleaning it up and trying to make it easier to audit and so on, instead of just stacking hacks on top of hacks.
And,
and I mean that's really been our focus, and I think we've the last couple of years we've sort of caught the testing bug, and we've had for quite a while some functional and integration testing, but we've never really had much unit testing. So we have unit testing for most of the really sensitive parts, like the packet parsing and the key parsing, which is really exposed attack surface in the server, and we want to extend that to basically everything. Well, as far as we can. I don't think everything's going to be completely feasible, but I think we've made a lot of progress, and we're certainly not done in that area.
Cool. Well, great. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to do this with us tonight, Damien. This turned out fantastic.
It's morning for you, right?
Yeah, it is.
Well, either way, we really appreciate you making the time, because I think people find this fascinating. This is all good stuff.
Oh, my pleasure.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Damien, and we'll have to catch up again in a couple of years, and we'll be talking about what the brand new stuff is with SSH.
I hope so.
Okay, time for the news roundup. But before we get into that, of course, we're going to mention our sponsor this week, which is going to be DigitalOcean, where you can still go and get signed up and use that coupon code FreeBSDNow to give you that free $10 credit that you can use for running a VM for, that'll work for 2 whole months. So that's a lot of time you can use to start playing with the VM there. And of course, their address is going to be digitalocean.com. And speaking of, I think I ran into a couple of these guys down in Texas Linux Fest this last weekend. But I talked to them about maybe having ZFS support out of box in a dropper might be kind of cool. So they said they will look into that for us, which could be kind of cool. But of course,
as long as you went with the one that had about 2 gigabytes of RAM or whatever, it'd be great.
Yeah. Make that an option for some of the higher tier ones for sure, where maybe you do want ZFS for something. That could be very neat, especially for doing like replications and stuff.
Yep, that's what I do.
On the box, if it's that would be really cool. So anyway, go ahead and get signed up today, folks. I mean, if you want to play with a VM up in the cloud running FreeBSD, it's an awesome way to do it. Of course, OpenBSD will work too. If you will run through a few more steps, you can get that installed and make that all go in their VM infrastructure. But go ahead and get signed up today. Don't wait. Use that coupon code. We don't know how long that'll be good for. Or they may just decide that goes away in a couple weeks. So if you've been meaning to do it, don't put it off anymore. Yep. Okay, well, first up in the news roundup, we have NetBSD had an open source conference in Shimane, which they had a whole bunch of stuff they were showing off here.
Yep.
As usual, they bring their whole bag of tricks. So it
Here's
looks like
the
this time,
NetBSD booth, and the table is completely covered with hardware. Like they had to, the keyboard had to be on a chair because it wouldn't fit on the desk.
I think they're just somebody challenged them like, I don't think you can run it on this many devices, and they're like, oh yeah, so they bring them all.
Here's an NWS 5000 SB. I don't know what that is, but it has a floppy drive.
All right, so a little older.
Yep. There's a Java station. Here's an NWS 1750. It's running LibreOffice. Very nice. And then you got here's NetBSD running on the Java station. You can see the console and everything. Apparently, it's called Mr. Coffee. It's
nice.
A MicroSpark 2E from 1996.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, so they repurpose all these old machines. You don't necessarily need to toss any of
But
these.
they even have new stuff here. They're running a Raspberry 2 running SunView, or Raspberry Pi 2 running SunView. And being tricked into thinking it's SunOS. That's cool.
Because, why not? That's pretty cool.
Yep, and they got an interview editor and more Raspberry Pi 2. This one's a Sharp X608030 at 25 megahertz, doing interesting things. Lots of
it's kind of
interesting
cool
stuff.
in the post here is they also have links to the demo images they used as well.
Yeah, so if you have one of these devices and would like to get it going, you can just one-click download that and stick it on.
Yeah, it looks like there's some instructions here on getting it set up on Raspberry Pi, it looks like. So yeah, definitely that'll make it easy. If you'd like to try and duplicate some of the cool stuff they're showing off here, that'll be one way to do it. Okay, next up we have the Bay Area FreeBSD users group. This is probably one of the more active, or if not the most active, FreeBSD users group that's out there.
Yes, they meet every month, and there's live streaming available now for it, and they've been recording them. And so we have this month's August meeting. I forget. If you want to attend the event, go to meetup.com and look for Bayfug. I think it's like the second Tuesday of the month or something. I forget when it is. But they have a bunch of the videos up here on IX's YouTube account. And this one in particular is about NextBSD, which is FreeBSD with LaunchD and a bunch of the mock IPC stuff from OS X ported over to it. And Jordan and Kip Macy talk a bit about what their plans are with it and some of the interesting things they're trying to do.
So they're calling it a spork of FreeBSD,
Yes.
I think, on the NextBSD site, which is pretty neat.
Yes, it's kind of similar. It's a fork of FreeBSD, but kind of in the same way that PCBSD is, except for it's it's also kind of like what HardenedBSD is. They want to try, LaunchD and doing that, but obviously with LaunchD's port not being perfect yet, they can't just import that into FreeBSD. And so they're kind of this technology demonstrator to show people, hey, this is a thing and you should try it out. But also, if people want to use it, they can. It's a fully supported operating system that they can use. It's not just a demo. So yeah.
Yeah, it looks like LaunchD is probably the big one here. I think some of the HardenedBSD stuff's merged into this as well, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that's pretty cool. It's neat to see that all this has landed there. So, of course, we also have a link in the show notes to a previous talk that was added where Devin Teskey was talking about adding the Jelly boot prompts to the bootloader. And then Adrian Chad talked about some problems and solutions related to bootloaders, for example, how we type encryption with non-US keyboard layouts, etc. So we got a couple cool videos here you can go watch from the Bay Area FreeBSD users group.
Yeah, because I had one bite me like that before. I was doing the install on a machine over an IPKVM, and the machine was in England, so it did a British layout keyboard, which is different. For example, the $sign, they don't have a $sign on their keyboard, or if they do, it's buried somewhere because they have the pound sign. But not what we would call the pound sign, right? The hash symbol.
Their pound sign.
Their currency symbol. And a bunch of other keys are in different places, like the backtick isn't in the same place. And so when I set my root password, I then I SSH'd in and tried to SU to root, and it's like, that's not the right password. I'm like,
nope.
The hell it isn't.
Yes, it is. All right. Yes,
exactly.
it is.
So yeah. I can definitely see where you'd
No,
have issues like that.
Yeah, we had those same issues very early on in PCBSD when we started doing localizations. Everyone changed their keyboard layout. It's like, oh wait, that didn't work from the command prompt, but it worked in the GUI, and
Yep.
yeah, that was fun. So I can empathize with getting those things all fixed and sorted out.
But yeah, it's a good talk at Bayfug. You should definitely check it out, and yeah, check out some of the previous ones. And if you're in the area, you should definitely go to it. The other video they have up here is the one from June, which is building a distributed hypervisor. So it's a company called TitleScale, and basically what they do is use Beehive on a couple of servers to make one big VM that has all the hardware of those servers. So it's like,
sharing it, huh?
Each server you buy from IX as a regular dual processor server can have only 1.5 terabytes of RAM each. What if your app needs more RAM?
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, it's a very interesting project to use Beehive and basically stitch the resources of multiple computers together into one virtual computer that has,
mammoth resources.
Ridiculous number of processors, ridiculous amount of RAM, access to all the network cards.
That's just crazy. Yeah. So is that something that we're seeing the source show up for? Or
I don't know. But
going into
it was
Beehive?
a
That would be really
presentation
cool
by the company that's building it, and talks a bit about how it works and how they're using Beehive and so on.
Okay, well, count me as intrigued.
Exactly.
I would like to see that.
Yeah, so the video is right there on the IX YouTube channel, so check it out.
That's right. Okay, well, next up in the news here, we got a cool article talking about configuring IPsec and L2TP for on OpenBSDs for speaking with Mac OS X clients. So, of course, if you've got an OpenBSD box and maybe you have some Mac OS 10 clients that need secure communications, guess what? You can make that happen. So it looks like you're only using the base tools in both operating systems. You can end up building a nice IPsec setup for tunneling all your traffic. So this guide is going to cover L2TP using NPPPD and pre-shared keys. And if you walk through it here, it's going to go through first, of course, the server setup, then client setup, and it wouldn't be an OpenBSD tutorial without your PF configuration as well. So we get all that also. Anything specific jump out at you on this one?
No,
Alan?
it just looks like everything you need to set it up to VPN in from your Mac. And they have all the screenshots of doing it the Mac side as well, since they can't just give you the commands to do.
That's right. That's right. No, it's pretty straightforward. So if you follow this, you should just be golden and ready to go at the end.
Yep. I'm sure that would be very useful to many people.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So hopefully some people can make some use of that here soon. Now, next up, we have an article here. We're talking about reliable bare metal with TrueOS. So the article's talking about, imagine a server version of PCBSD with some useful utilities pre-installed, and that's pretty much what TrueOS is. That's our server version of PCBSD. So it includes our boot environments and grub setup and all of our PCBSD command line versions of our utilities, preloaded along with a variety of other packages to make it more useful out of box for people, especially somebody coming from a Linux background. We're trying to be a little nicer for you. So yeah, you can have bash if you really want it. But anyway, this article is going to walk you through setting up a FreeBSD current server using TrueOS to create a solid backup solution. But most importantly, he's also going to walk through how you can keep everything redundant and deal with hard drives failing. So there's going to be some ZFS goodies here as well. But the author, when he was writing this, he chose to go with the current branch because of the delay between regular releases, of course. So he wants newer stuff now.
Yes, he wants the new technology now, but he wants it when it's stable. And, the TrueOS monthly snapshots of head seem like the perfect mix of getting the new code as soon as it's available versus, the stability of, not having updates come in every single day or something.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, you get a month to play with the new release. So you're only a month behind at most of what's actually happening up in the source tree. But this is a lot easier, and everything's binary done.
Yep.
So you can do easy in-place upgrades, but using TrueOS. So you can use our update servers and basically follow current. And you can do this for PCBSD as well, but he's focused on the server side here for TrueOS. So if you're interested in doing that and tracking current on your system, you may want to take a look at this, because this is certainly an easy way to do it. And I've been surprised how many people really like this.
Yep.
I guess there was a lot of demand for people wanting to run current on their box, both desktop and server.
Yeah, and he also has in here, he actually shows an example of replacing a failed hard drive in the ZFS array, and shows just how easy that is.
Yeah, it's really not that many commands when you think about it. So at the end, you just run the restamp grub and you're done. It'll go ahead and make that drive bootable and you're all set.
I can definitely see where that would be
Okay.
compelling to a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I know I use it here on all the systems I
Yep.
run because it's just really
We
easy.
all the office machines here at Scale Engine run it as well. Our
Mm-hmm.
our intern had to learn FreeBSD really quickly, and
Yep.
making his desktop PCBSD meant it had all the stuff he was used to using Linux. You know, he had his favorite text editor or whatever, and you know, KDE is KDE. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, he got to quickly dive in and learn all about it, and now he's going to install FreeBSD on his home machines.
Nice. Well, I'm glad we could help make that
Yep.
transition. Okay. Well, last up here in the news roundup, we got some kernel WXRX on i386 news. So, of course, we've mentioned some kernel changes about WXRX and OpenBSD a while back, and you can refer back to the notes for that, or we have a link here to the mailing list post. But the work was mainly for the x86-64 architecture, which obviously makes sense. That's what most people are going to be running
Yep.
on current hardware now.
But if you're
But it
running some
looks
of those
like
small embedded routers and stuff where you get better memory efficiency and so on from using 32-bit, but you missed out on
Mhm.
some of those features, and now maybe you don't.
That's right. It looks like Mike Larkin's been the one working on this and trying not to leave people out with older hardware or people, like you said, who have maybe smaller embedded systems. So some of that similar kernel works now in the i386 platform as well. And we have a link back here with our interview with Mike. So if you missed that one, maybe go back and take a listen to that.
Yes.
And you can find out a little more background info on what a WXRX is and how that works as a memory protection. Okay, it's time for feedback and questions as we go ahead and start wrapping up the show here. But of course, before we do, we got some Tarsnap news this week. So before we bring the news out really quick, tarsnap.com/BSD Now, where you can go get signed up and start using it right away. Do your encrypted backups. But
Yes.
Speaking of it, what's this article we have here? It looks like Colin wrote
Yes.
something.
So there's a new version of Tarsnap that just came out. You should definitely update to it. And it fixes a bug that had to do with libarchive. And there was a 1 byte heap overflow or something. I think it was the null terminator on a string wasn't being accounted for correctly or something. So it's a bug that could have security implications, but nobody's quite sure exactly how exploitable it is.
Sure.
Or they don't think it's that exploitable. So instead of a regular bug bounty, since the bug's already been found and fixed, Colin is offering an exploit bounty. He will pay you $1,000 if you can find a way to exploit this bug.
Interesting.
And then another researcher has come out and doubled it. So there's a matching bounty of a second $1,000. So if you can, if you go over to Colin's blog post at demonology.net, and he says that, in light of this, Tarsnap is offering a $1,000 exploit bounty. The first person before the end of 2015 who can convincingly demonstrate a serious exploitation of this bug will receive $1,000. He talks about, well, there's, lots of different bug bounty programs. This one's, part of the work's already been done for you. Here's the bug. You just have to exploit it. And Colin wants the information so he can, since he wasn't able to think up a way to exploit it, and he was like to someone else to show him how, and he would pay $1,000 for that and use the information to further harden Tarsnap so that it's not vulnerable to things like that elsewhere as well.
It's almost like they take their security and encryption really seriously.
Yes.
Maybe all your backup companies should do that because it's your data. You don't want anyone else getting it.
Yep.
So, this is what makes Tarsnap stand out from the crowd, guys. So, seriously, go take a look at that. If you can find a way to exploit it, you might come up with a couple grand out of it. So, how cool is that?
So, make sure you're running Tarsnap 1.0.36 as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's a
nice.
Thomas Patak, founder of Starfighter and a general security expert, has offered to match the bounty. So now it's $2,000. All you have to do is exploit this bug, and they've already pointed out the bug to you.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll have...
if anyone figures that out, we'll let you know, of course. Now let's get to the feedback and roundup this week here. It looks like Marcus writes in first here. He asks a question about printers and PCBSD. He says, hi, for some time I've been evaluating PCBSD beside my Mint installation, and I like it a lot, not only for the benefits that the BSDs provide. He said, but what keeps me from running it as my main working environment is that there are only Linux drivers available for my Epson Workforce WF7620. I can't seem to get the printer to work. But as there are drivers available, is there a way to utilize these under BSD? I tried to configure Linux compatibility, but had no success. After tracking down the issue and solutions to get my old NVIDIA GTS 8400 to work properly, I was convinced I would master this challenge, but I've had no luck so far, despite spending some hours searching and trying. Could you point me in the right direction? Thanks in advance, and keep up the good work. Yeah, this one's a little tricky. How much cups do you know, Alan? I've had to mess with this.
Yeah, so
before.
we have a Samsung network printer here. So it actually does Ethernet and internet printing. So it was fairly easy to make it print because it just does IPP. However, we wanted to use this scanner functionality it has as well.
Oh, yeah.
And my student did manage to get it working by using the Linux compatibility thing in the drivers from Samsung or whatever. So yeah, basically if you have the Linux kernel module loaded, the Linux driver might just work.
Might work.
It's not a kernel driver like a video card or a storage controller or something. It's just a cups driver.
So userland. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess make sure you can run it first of all. Find a package that's compatible with CentOS. What 6.4?
We're on 6.6.
6.6. So if you can find something that would run on that on Linux, maybe we could then run that on 10.2, for example, in PCBSD. And then I guess let us know. You didn't provide any actual info, like when you ran it, does it give you an error? Does it say it's messing some syscall or something? But if you have any more info on that, please send it in. We'd love to take a look at that. I'm personally curious to see if we can get that working. I've had to fiddle with a few other ones in the past, and typically they were doable. It was just finding the right combination of things to make Cups happy with
That's why part of the reason I went with the internet, the network-based printer was because we have a lot of computers here, and it's great to have them all share the printer, but also I didn't want one certain computer to have to be on in order to print from it. And I didn't want to have to fight with drivers and so on. So the printer has its own IP address, and no matter what operating system you are, there's a standard protocol to print to it.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing here with a Brother printer, and that has worked great for a number of years because I have a lot of PCBSD systems printing to it, and Cups driver just works.
Yep, and we even got the Sane stuff to work to scan from it. I think we ended up having to connect the USB drive to the PCBSD computer for that, but we did have success with that as well.
So I'll tell you a little trick. So my Brother has a neat feature for scanning. I never set up any software for it. It'll actually scan and scan right to a PDF, and then it'll upload that to a server on your network.
I think my printer has that functionality, but I didn't play with it.
Yeah. I set that up once, and I have not had to touch it in years because it just works. Like I put a directory, and it's like when I scan something, stuff goes there. So it is quite nice. So anyway, let us know if you have any other results you run into with that, or if you have specific errors, since I don't have that specific model printer around to play with.
So next up, Sean writes about needing some NAS help. So he says, first, thanks so much for the show, especially the Brian Cantrill interview. I think everybody enjoyed that one. He says, so here's my problem. I have a FreeBSD NAS running 10 stable with 4 1 terabyte drives in a RAID Z configuration, so single parity. The array works fine when copying files to it locally. I copied 300 gigabytes of movies, music, and photos from a directory on / to the RAID Z volume and had no problems whatsoever. When I copy data over a network protocol, it copies at 61 megabytes and then stalls out, and then varlog messages spams cam status command timed out errors. He says, I tried over NFS, SMB, SSH, and AFP, and he's getting the error. Well, if CAM is reporting the problem, that's the hard drive.
Yeah, that's local to the system. That's not necessarily a network issue.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like if you have more of the CAM error, it probably tells you which AHCI channel is timing out, and that will tell you which of your disks is actually giving you problems. So I think maybe it's just coincidence that it only seems to happen when you do it over the network. But yeah, if the error is from CAM, that's actually the disk timing out.
That's true. Yeah, CAM doesn't care where the data originated from. It's just trying to send it to the disk. So, is your Z-pool status clean? It'd be something I'd ask because he says he looked at it, but that's odd. Usually you'll see something in there pretty quickly.
Yeah, and even the smart status, like if you're running a smart CTL -A on the drive, the status will probably say pass, but there's a log section where it will log every time there was a timeout on the drive. And, if there's a bunch of timeouts while writing, then that suggests there's something wrong with the disk, or at least certain sectors of it.
Okay. So yeah, if you find any more info on that,
if you want to send us
We
like
can
the
try and follow up
actual
with that.
the actual logs lines from varlog messages and maybe the output of cam control dev list and then zpool status, we might be able to help you isolate that.
Okay. So next up this week we have Theo, who writes in. It's really long, so we won't read all of it, but he asks about PCBSD pre-installed laptops. So I'll just read the intro here. So he says, first of all, mandatory, great job on the show. It's a source of invaluable information to me as I love most Unix, but my current surroundings keep me in a Linux-only environment. Yeah, small tier. So it was pretty hard to keep up with what's going on in the sane part of the world before the show. Well, we're glad we can help you out. So I will kind of summarize the rest of it here. But basically, he's asking, where can we find a PCBSD laptop or FreeBSD, as well as something where we know it just works with all the hardware? And he talks about maybe having like two different revisions, like a portable model that's like an Atom with obviously more portability and lower weight and all that. And then maybe like a developer model, something a little bigger now where you have room for running VMs and with FireWire and Serial and all that. So you can do debugging and development and all that jazz. And the very bottom, too long, didn't read, is he will throw buckets of money at a design for PCBSD laptop and keep up the great work. So this is actually pretty difficult.
Yeah.
To do.
Yeah, laptops, even if you do find, for example, there's certain models of Lenovo that work very well, but if you go tell people to order that, then at some point Lenovo randomly changes the Wi-Fi chip to one that's not as good. Or
so some inside stuff here. We've tried this for a couple years at IX Systems. I mean, we actually put a lot of effort into trying several different laptops where we could sell them as PCBSD laptops or FreeBSD laptops where everything just works, suspend, resume, Wi-Fi, all that. And the problem you have is no vendor will commit to building them exactly the same for a certain production run or for a certain length of time unless you order large quantities of them. I think like 10,000
and then
was the minimal number of them.
Just the cost of warehouse space to hold the 10,000 until you sell them is...
Yeah, and you have to sit on them, and you know how laptops are. They're outdated in about 5 months, right? There's the new hotness is out. So that's a difficult proposition. Obviously, we'd love to do that. I know IX Systems has tried to do that in the past. I don't know at the moment if there's any chance of that happening, unless maybe you put together a Kickstarter or something.
Well, there was
prove that there's demand for it.
There was that like Libre laptop or whatever that was supposed to be mostly supported. I think those ship eventually later this year.
Yeah, and if so, maybe the route to go is we get a hold of something like that, make sure everything's supported by FreeBSD on it, and then that becomes the quasi-official PCBSD laptop or something. But at the moment, I wouldn't say there's an official one, but Lenovo's your best bet. Stay away from the X1 Carbons. I'm still working on getting that to work. That's all Broadwell and but the older Lenovo's work well. So
anyway, X230, T430, T530.
That's right. So, of course, if this ever changes or if something shows up and we find good laptops, maybe we should make that a frequent thing, Alan. When we hear about new systems that are like the best ones to order for compatibility, maybe we can pass that along on the show.
I know Brad and a couple other Brad Davis and a couple other people bought the Libre laptop thing. I forget what it's called now. But we'll definitely find out how good they are once those actually ship. And if they are the right solution, then we can jump on it. Because, like you said, unless you're looking to order 10,000 of them, it's quite difficult to actually get something like this built. And, maybe a project like that's, not BSD specific. It's just, I want a laptop that contains, trusted OpenSSH components will be the right answer.
Okay. I think it's the Librium. Dash 15, I think, is the one that we're talking about here. So, that may be the one. Maybe we find something like that, and as long as we know the hardware will stay roughly the same, then we can do that.
I think that's definitely the most difficult part because just, manufacturers will stop making a part when they have a newer version. And then it's like, well...
Or they get a cheaper one on a deal on a cheaper Wi-Fi chip or something. And, now
it changes everything, and endless
it happens. So, of course, we'll bring you any other news related to that in the future. But don't worry. We'd all like one, too. I would love to have one. So that would be great. Okay, so as we wrap up the show here, guys, you've heard it before, but we'll repeat it for you. Send everything to feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's the place where you send everything. Questions, comments, show ideas, topics, or stories you want mentioned. Send them all right there, please.
Yes,
also, go ahead.
Ideas for people to interview or volunteering to interview. that'd be great. We need more interviews.
That's right. Also, last reminder, I think this is about your last chance here. BSD Now t-shirts are available, and they're going to be shipping in September. So you've only got a couple days left to place an order. You need to do it before the 1st of the month.
Yep.
And then they're gone, and we're not putting them back up again.
Yep.
So go ahead and get those now if you haven't. Don't wait any longer. And also, pre-orders for OpenBSD 5.8 CDs are now open, and the artwork is really good this time around.
Yes.
I mean, it's usually really good anyway, but this is pretty slick.
Yes.
So it's for the 20th anniversary release, and you'll want that.
Yes, I love the idea of the shot with, pictures of a lot of the developers stuck in there.
That's right. So anyway, yeah, go ahead and get that pre-ordered today. Don't wait on that one either. Get them before they're gone. So, of course, thank you for being with us this week on the show. I look forward to talking to you again next week.